Story then at this hour. 57.5% ANC, 20.8% DA, EFF 10.8%, IFP 3.4%. Then the other parties combined together at 7.6%. All right, Kaya Zitole, I'm going to ask you your assessment so far as you see the results are up at 100% of those votes counted. What do you think of that?
I think, of course, the big talking point of this entire election will be the question of, the decline of the ANC, which we've seen is something that a lot of people suspected might happen, but perhaps it was always a question of how big this decline was going to be. I think for them, having moved from 62% to 57% is something that reflects that all the things that society has been complaining about regarding how the ANC has conducted itself in its capacity as the governing party have really now translated into the electorate then saying, actually, we are not going to endorse this party. We're not going to renew your mandate if you do not change the way that you've done things. But perhaps I think the big issue here is that the situation might have been much worse had they perhaps not been seen to be really working towards fixing the state. So you've seen some of the things that they've done over the past 18 months, particularly Cyril Ramaphosa, appointing the right people into areas that really a lot of things needed to be fixed. That obviously assisted in getting some of the people to say, look, we think they're still on the path of recovery, they're on the path of doing things right. So that arrested the decline. So I think the decline could have been much worse had some of these things not been done. I think also, of course, we always expected that the economic freedom fighters would grow, if not organically, but gently on the basis that what they were able to achieve in 2014, a 6% victory, was really on the basis of a very short time span in which they had to formulate themselves as a party and then start campaigning. So obviously over the past 5 years, they've been able to sort of really start building their grassroots presence, and obviously that would translate into more people being aware of the economic freedom fighters, and some of them then saying, actually, not only are we aware of who you are, but we also do want to support the type of policies and the types of ideas that you're putting forward. So for me, those are the big two talking points, and also, of course, the rise of the Freedom Front Plus. And I think for a lot of people that are then trying to figure out exactly what that rise is predated on, I do suspect that the DA's inability to really come out as a party that stands on a few core key principles that everybody seems to understand has not worked in their favor. So if you talk about questions around the land expropriation issues, the DA prefers to intellectualize these things. But unfortunately, the way politics works is that unless you can create soundbite that makes people very aware and very clear on what your stance is, it becomes difficult for them to engage and really deal with the nuances. So if you look at the EFF, for example, they're very explicit and clear in their stance. You might not agree with it, but it's easy to understand. Yeah. Similarly with the Freedom Front Plus, you don't have to agree with what they say, but at least you know what it is that they're saying, and there is no debate around it. There is no confusion around it. And I think the DA, in trying to be this, holistic party that talks about one South Africa for all, which means they need to embrace everybody and not alienate anyone, they've then struggled to really identify a few core issues that people can say, this, if anything happens, at least the DA will stand on this one. So when people see you as a party that blows anywhere the wind blows, it does really expose you to the possibility that if an election is really centered around a few particular issues, and in those issues you are not seen as having really nailed your mast to some particular point, then of course people are going to gravitate towards the people that have made their stance clear. So some of these voters might actually come back to the DA later on, provided that the issues at the next election, whether it's the local government elections or the national elections, are a bit different, and the DA is able to then communicate and articulate its stance, unlike what they've done in 2019.
Well, Kai, I mean, that's very interesting what you're saying about the DA. Do you feel that they might be in a situation where, damned if you do, damned if you don't? I mean, you can see with the FF Plus, they know who their market is. They know who they're talking to. Possibly a lot of the farmers would have voted for them. A lot of the Afrikaans community would have voted for them. So they know who their people are. The BLF, for example, or the EFF, they know who their people are, what they call the woke blacks, I suppose. Is the DA finding itself in a position where they don't know actually which team, I suppose one can say, to side on? And should they then strategize and say, you know what, actually this is who our people are and this is who we're talking to, which is actually what, to talk about the elections where we saw Trump Trump winning in the US. He knew who he was talking to, and a lot of us were surprised about him becoming the president. And I suppose that's a similar sort of surprise we're having with the FF Plus, where some of us might have thought, well, they won't make it this election. They're not going to get a lot of votes. And here we are. They got a lot of votes because they had a firm stance, as you mentioned, to the issue of land. So what then should the DA do going forward? Because I suppose they are in a point of being confused, because they are saying to the black electorate, hey, we are here for you. And then they are saying to the white electorate, we're also here for you. So are we then saying that the black and the white electorate want two different things then?
I think for me, the problem with the DA is that internally they know exactly what the limitations are. And the way I look at these particular limitations is that for them, they might know what it is that will probably work best for the white voters that they're trying to get on board. They might know what works well for the black voters that they're trying to get on board. But unfortunately, in some of these instances, there tend to be irreconcilable ideological issues that are central to each of these constituencies. Take the example of BEE, for example. So last year, the DA came out and simply said that they are disowning the concept of BEE. It hasn't worked, and they're simply saying that this is not the way things ought to be. Now, of course, there is the reality that there are some black people that the DA is trying to appeal to, and for these black people, BEE is seen as an instrument of intervention. It may not have been implemented properly by the ANC government, but it's still an instrument that gives them an opportunity, that gives them a pathway of really getting up the economic ladder. So if you then come out as a political party and simply say we're disowning this process without actually putting an alternative out there, you create the type of anxieties that then lead these voters to say, well, actually, these people are not championing our cause. Similarly, if you're on the other side and looking at the white voters that the DA is trying to cater to, these white voters would have been the ones that say, look, BEE is something that is a threat to us. We do not like it. We do not want to implement it. So the DA says we're disowning BEE. That's fine as an inception
Kai,
point.
I'm going to have to cut you there. I'm going to have to cut you there. There is an announcement. Apologies to you, Kaya Sitole. We're going to have to cut you there. We're going to have to cross to the Johannesburg Election Centre, the IEC Centre here in Auckland Park. There is an announcement there. And of course, it is all about the Gauteng results at this point. 100% of those are captured. So the announcement going there. Nozintombi Mia is there in the Johannesburg studio.